Wherever there is ownership, there is also theft. These two are not very different from each other, ownership and being a thief. We carry the burden of those who can see the difference. We are among those who become thieves when asked the meaning of ownership. In the world of sultans, padishahs, pashas, and beys, who have acquired enough property for 7 worlds with the sword, inheritance, or deception without working at all, we have seen once that ownership is no different from being a thief. Can a person really own something? But can a person be owned? This is the tale of those who prefer theft to own rather than own to avoid being a thief. The tale of those who dream of being free but are afraid of not owning their lives. Victorian calendar 1776. Tell them that the soil will give you your due. The punishment of the one who covets another's property is ready. Do not give any mercy to those who abandon the blessings of the Lord and reach out for what is unlawful, those who block the roads and steal. Fear the soil, for its punishment is severe. The beautiful girl was still in the prime of her life and was unaware of everything. She was sitting in a large, calmly moving carriage with the people who had always been with her throughout her life. She was well fed and happy. After all, she was the daughter of a pasha. She had satin shoes on her feet and a silk dress. There were gold rings in her ears, and a thin, silver-embroidered crown glittered on her head. Her brown hair was strong, and her brown eyes were bright. She had a valuable wooden box with mother-of-pearl embroidery on her lap and between her hands. As she looked out the window of the carriage, she thought about what awaited her in her life. As the tall trees of the dark, wild-looking forest slowly flowed by, she felt a strange excitement and peace inside her that came from being separate from this whole world. She would soon turn 17. Her father would find a good consort and marry her off. When Lady Eleanor thought of this idea, she felt a warm excitement. Ever since she was little, she had dreamed of a brave young man on the back of her horse as her husband. A handsome hero who would look at her and admire her would immediately appear before her father and ask for Eleanor. And her father would happily accept this brave and noble man's request and begin wedding preparations. They would love each other very much and have beautiful children like them. "It's getting dark, my lady," whispered Bellis, her odalisque sitting on her left. "Would you like me to turn on the lights?" Eleanor only nodded her head in approval. Her mind was still in the distant future, in what awaited her. Perhaps darkness outside was increasing her fear, and in order to escape from it, she tried to think of all the beautiful things she had and the even more enjoyable life she would have in the future. She didn't know if what she was afraid of was the wildlife that started right outside her luxurious carriage. In fact, she was unaware of the world's hunger, misery, wars, murders, and looting. She had never gone hungry for a day, never fought to gain anything, but she could still recognize the horror in that increasingly dark life beyond the window as a premonition. Opposite the two girls, an old man was sitting. He was wrapped tightly in a white robe. His snow-white beard and long hair were neatly trimmed and combed. On his head was a high imama with a gold-embroidered ribbon wrapped around it. His pale skin was wrinkled, but he did not seem to have lost the strength in his hands with age. His long, pointed nose resembled a crow, according to Lady Eleanor. But the odalisque Bellis was most afraid of the threatening look in his small, pitch-black eyes. "Sit down, girl," Lala Arathkin said to the odalisque, who had moved to light the lamps. He raised her bony index finger upward, as if he were pointing at something on the roof of the carriage, but his eyes were looking down into nothing. He mumbled a word. A spark appeared and disappeared for a moment at the tip of his finger, and the 4 oil lamps hanging on the walls of the carriage ignited one by one. The two girls grinned with joy and clapped their hands when they saw this. They had rarely seen the old man display his skills. When they was little, they would always follow her around the garden of the mansion and beg like crazy. But Lala Arathkin would never agree. He had been responsible for all of Lady Eleanor's education since she was born. He had taught her how to read and write, foreign languages, and the history of people in long lessons. It seemed that this education would continue until she got married and moved to her husband's house. But Arathkin was actually capable of much greater power, and he rarely showed it, only when it was necessary to protect his lady. A little later, the weather grew darker and silence reigned over the carriage again. Eleanor Hanum carefully opened the box she was holding in her hands and looked inside. She had done this many times along the way, but she was so happy with the gift she had received that she could not get enough of looking at it. She wanted it to be in front of her eyes all the time. "Leave it, Ellen," said Lala when he saw this. He looked even more threatening when her eyebrows furrowed. "You did not let it go from your lap the whole way. When you get to the mansion, you can show it to everyone as you wish. Such valuables are not taken out of their hiding places on deserted roads in the middle of nowhere." After her tutor's scolding, Lady Eleanor immediately closed the box but continued to hold it in her arms. After a while, the carriage slowed down and stopped, and they heard the coachman calling. Lala Arathkan opened the door a little and looked outside. "Sir, as you said, I don't think we will make it tonight," the girls heard the coachman say. "The back of the caravan is also far behind. Should we wait a bit? I will feed the horses too." The old man sighed deeply and approved of the coachman. He actually wanted to go as soon as possible. It was the third evening of their journey. He wanted to get home now, get his lady to her mansion, which was protected by soldiers, and only then would he be able to sleep comfortably. The caravan they joined was a large convoy of 100 camels, but they had made a big gap in order to reach the plateau where they planned to spend the night. They had slept in comfortable caravan palaces the previous 2 nights, but now there was no other settlement until Lut. "We will wait for half an hour," he said to his tutor, Elena Marhanam. "After the others arrive, we will reach the place where we will spend the night in 2 or 3 hours." But he had barely finished speaking when suddenly, from behind, not far from the road, shouts and screams broke out. Lala immediately went outside to see what was happening. Complete darkness had fallen on the forest, rising on both sides of them. With the pale light of the moon, the old man could only see the shadows of a few merchants pulling their loaded camels at the top of the hill they had just crossed. The sounds of swords clashing with each other began to be heard shortly. 2 or 3 horsemen and a similar number of foot soldiers who had crossed the hill at a run appeared in the darkness of the night. "What is happening?" Lady Eleanor asked, unconsciously huddling close to her odalisque Bellis in fear. "Stay inside," Lala ordered without explaining. One of the horsemen who had caught up to the carriage was stopped by the other horsemen who were assigned to protect the Hanum. This was a soldier from Lut who stopped in front of Arathkan and immediately took off his helmet. "Bandits, my lord," he said breathlessly. Hearing this, the eyes of the 2 girls were wide with fear, and they hugged each other even tighter.